I'm Denise 30, a financial analyst in Chicago, who's always felt like an unwanted expense in my parents' lives. Despite years of criticism, I decided their 35th anniversary was the perfect time to heal our relationship by paying off their mortgage. But when I handed them the gift box with the house deed inside, my mother set it aside with a cold stare. "We don't need handouts from our freeloader daughter," my father sneered. They had no idea what they'd just rejected. I'll never forget their faces when I revealed the contents. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this emotional journey. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Detroit wasn't always difficult. My earliest memories include weekend picnics at Belle Isle Park and my parents laughing together in the kitchen of our modest two-story home. My father, Harold, worked at an automotive plant, and my mother, Margaret, taught at the local elementary school. Life seemed normal and stable until I turned 8. That was the year everything changed. The automotive industry took a devastating hit, and my father was among thousands laid off during mass company downsizing. I remember the night he came home, his face, ashen hands trembling as he told my mother the news. 30 years with the company, and they tossed me aside like garbage, he said, his voice cracking. The financial strain transformed my parents. My mother quit teaching to work multiple jobs, waitressing during the day and cleaning offices at night. The warm, patient woman who once read me bedtime stories disappeared, replaced by someone constantly exhausted and irritable. She began referring to normal childhood expenses as another drain on our limited resources. "Do you know how many hours I have to work to pay for those dance lessons?" she'd snap when I mentioned an upcoming recital fee. "Maybe if we didn't have to spend so much on you, we could keep the electricity on without worrying." My father sank into depression, spending days searching for jobs and nights drinking cheap beer in our basement. His rejection letters piled up on the kitchen counter, each one deepening the lines on his forehead. Their arguments about money became the soundtrack of my childhood. "You need to find something, Harold, anything," my mother would shout. "What do you think I'm trying to do, Margaret? You think I enjoy watching you work yourself to death while I sit here useless?" He'd fire back. I learned to make myself invisible during these fights, hiding in my room with a book or homework. School became my sanctuary, and academic achievement my escape route. By 6th grade, I was bringing home perfect report cards, hoping for some acknowledgement or pride from my parents. I'll never forget the day I won the district-wide math competition. My teacher had called my parents personally to share the news, explaining this achievement could lead to scholarship opportunities in the future. When I came home clutching my blue ribbon and certificate, my mother barely looked up from the bills spread across our kitchen table. "That's nice, Denise. Did your teacher happen to mention if that ribbon comes with cash? Because that would actually be useful right now." My father, who had finally found sporadic work as a janitor, just shrugged. "Scholarships are years away. We need to figure out how to survive this month." Holidays in our house were particularly stressful. While other families in our neighborhood decorated elaborately for Christmas, our celebrations were minimal. One December when I was 12, I overheard my parents arguing about whether they could afford any gifts. "She doesn't need anything anyway," my mother said. "The school already provides her lunch. What more does she want from us?" That Christmas, I received a secondhand sweater and a mumbled explanation that times were tight. I smiled and thanked them, already understanding that my future would depend entirely on my own efforts. By high school, the emotional gap between us had widened into a chasm. I threw myself into every academic opportunity, joining clubs and activities that would strengthen my college applications. My parents never attended a single school event, not my debate team finals, not my induction into the National Honor Society, not even my graduation ceremony until the last minute. I spent evenings researching scholarship opportunities, while my parents continued their cycle of financial stress and blame. Their relationship with each other deteriorated alongside their relationship with me. They weren't cruel people, just broken by circumstances and unable to see beyond their immediate struggles to support their child's future. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Torres, became more of a parent figure than either of my actual parents. She helped me navigate college applications and financial aid forms, offering the encouragement my parents couldn't provide. "Your parents are fighting their own battles, Denise," she told me during one of our meetings. Sometimes adults get so caught in their own pain, they can't see past it. Don't let their limitations become yours. Those words became my mantra as I approached the end of high school, determined to create a different future for myself. When my acceptance letters began arriving, including one from the University of Michigan with a full academic scholarship, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps this achievement would finally earn my parents' approval. Instead, when I showed them the letter, my father scoffed. University of Michigan. That's an expensive school. Even with a scholarship, there'll be costs we can't cover. We don't have money for dorm supplies or textbooks or whatever else they don't include, my mother added. You'll be on your own for all that. I nodded, already knowing this would be the case. I know, I've saved enough from my part-time job to cover the extras. What I didn't tell them was that I'd been preparing for years, working weekends and summers, knowing I would need to fund my own education entirely. Their lack of enthusiasm didn't surprise me, but it still stung. That night, I made a promise to myself that I would build a life so secure that I'd never have to fear ending up bitter and broken like my parents. My college years at the University of Michigan marked my first taste of true independence. The campus in Ann Arbor felt worlds away from the tension-filled house in Detroit, though it was only about 45 miles. Moving into my dormitory, I couldn't help but notice the stark difference between my experience and that of my hallmates. While parents helped other freshmen unpack arranging bedding and decorations with tearful hugs and proud photos, I arrived alone with 2 suitcases containing everything I owned. My parents had dropped me off at the campus entrance, my father barely putting the car in park before saying, "We can't stay, your mother has a shift in an hour." Their parting words still ring in my ears. Don't come running home if it gets too hard. This was your choice. Despite the challenging start, I was determined to thrive. My scholarship covered tuition and basic room and board, but everything else, textbooks, supplies, winter clothing, and any social activities, would be my responsibility. Within my first week, I secured a position at the university library working evening shifts and another job serving breakfast at a campus cafe starting at 5:30 a.m. My schedule was grueling. I would wake before dawn for my cafe shift, attend classes all day, study between classes, work at the library until closing, and then return to my dorm to complete homework until I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. While other students joined clubs and attended football games, I calculated how many hours I needed to work to afford next semester's books. During Parents' Weekend, when families flooded the campus with care packages and took students to nice restaurants, I picked up extra shifts, telling myself the quiet campus library was preferable to watching others receive the parental support I'd never known. It was during one of these lonely weekends that I met Jennifer Price and Marcus Williams. They were studying in the library when Jennifer noticed I had been there for hours, both as a student and then changing into my work uniform. "Do you ever leave this place?" she asked with a friendly smile. "Not if I can help it," I replied. "Free heating and internet." That casual interaction blossomed into my first real friendship. Jennifer, a psychology major from Chicago, and Marcus, a business student from Philadelphia, became my chosen family. They included me in their study groups, saved me a plate when they cooked meals in the dorm kitchen, and never made me feel less than when I couldn't join costlier outings. When Jennifer learned I was staying on campus during Thanksgiving break, because I couldn't afford to go home, she insisted I join her family in Chicago. "My parents always make enough food for an army," she said, waving away my protests. The warmth of the Price household was revelatory. Jennifer's parents asked about my classes with genuine interest, celebrated my academic achievements, and treated me like a second daughter. Watching Mr. Price help with the dishes, while Mrs. Price described her daughter's childhood antics, showed me what family support could look like. "You're welcome here anytime," Mrs. Price told me before I left. "Any friend of Jennifer's is family to us." That brief glimpse into a healthy family dynamic made returning to campus both easier and harder. Easier because I felt less alone. Harder because it highlighted everything I'd been missing. My parents rarely called during those years. When they did, conversations were brief and centered on practical matters. "Are you managing your money?" my mother would ask, never inquiring about my classes or friends. "The last thing we need is for you to ask us for a bailout." I maintained perfect grades despite my work schedule earning a spot on the dean's list every semester. My academic performance caught the attention of Professor Hamilton, who taught advanced financial analysis. After class one day, she asked about my post-graduation plans. I'm focusing on corporate finance, I told her. I want a career with stability and growth potential. She nodded thoughtfully. I have connections at several firms in Chicago. With your analytical skills, you'd be an excellent candidate for their internship program. Thanks to Professor Hamilton's recommendation, I secured a prestigious summer internship before my senior year at Westbrook Financial Advisors in Chicago. The internship paid enough that I could afford a small sublet in the city, and for the first time I experienced financial breathing room. The firm valued my computational skills and work ethic, offering me a job upon graduation before the summer ended. When I called my parents with this news, hoping finally for some acknowledgement, my mother's response was predictable. Chicago's an expensive city. You'll probably be asking us for rent money within a month. Actually, I countered, keeping my voice even. The starting salary is quite competitive. Well, don't get ahead of yourself, my father chimed in. Those financial companies hire plenty of college kids and then lay them off when times get tough. Trust me, I know how these things work. By graduation day, I had secured my position at Westbrook, found a tiny but affordable apartment in Chicago, and mapped out a 5-year financial plan. My parents did attend the ceremony, arriving just as it began and leaving immediately after citing the need to avoid traffic. As I accepted my diploma, I searched for them in the crowd, spotting my mother checking her watch and my father scrolling through his phone. In that moment, I realized I had been seeking validation from people incapable of giving it. The real achievement wasn't the diploma in my hand, but the self-reliance I'd built despite their lack of support. Jennifer's parents hosted a small graduation dinner for both of us that evening, presenting me with a leather portfolio embossed with my initials. For your new career, Mr. Price said with genuine pride in his voice. We know you're going to do amazing things. I packed my belongings the following day, preparing for the move to Chicago. My parents didn't help my mother claiming back pain, and my father suddenly finding yard work that couldn't wait. As I loaded the last box into my used car, my mother appeared briefly in the doorway. I suppose you think you're better than us now with your fancy degree and city job, she said, arms crossed. I looked at her, seeing not anger, but fear in her eyes. Fear that I might succeed where they had failed. Fear that I was escaping the limitations that had defined their lives. No, I replied softly. I just think I might be luckier. She didn't respond, and I drove away from my childhood home toward a future I was building one careful decision at a time, determined never to be financially or emotionally dependent on people who saw me as nothing but a burden. The next 7 years in Chicago transformed me from a cautious, hypervigilant college graduate into a respected financial professional. My tiny starter apartment, with its view of another building's brick wall, became a stepping stone to increasingly better living situations as my career progressed. Westbrook Financial Advisors proved to be everything I had hoped for professionally, offering clear advancement paths and recognizing merit over office politics. I specialized in sustainable investment strategies, helping clients build portfolios that balanced ethical considerations with strong returns. My analytical abilities and attention to detail earned me a reputation as someone who could spot overlooked opportunities and mitigate risks others missed. Each year brought new responsibilities, modest but steady salary increases, and growing confidence in my professional identity. 3 years into my career, I was assigned to work with Laura Zimmerman, a senior partner known for her exacting standards and brilliant investment strategies. Under her mentorship, I refined my skills and learned to trust my instincts when analyzing market trends. You have exceptional technical abilities, Denise, she told me during a performance review, but you need to work on your client communication. You keep people at arm's length. Her observation was accurate but uncomfortable. The self-protection mechanisms I'd developed growing up hadn't disappeared just because I'd achieved financial stability. I maintained a professional demeanor with colleagues rarely joining after-work gatherings or sharing personal information. My apartment remained sparsely decorated, as though I were still expecting to need a quick escape. The trust issues from my childhood affected my personal life even more profoundly. Dating felt like navigating a minefield of potential rejection and disappointment. I would end relationships at the first sign of conflict, convinced it was better to leave than to be left. My few friends were kept carefully compartmentalized from each other and from my work life. It wasn't until my 5th year in Chicago that these coping mechanisms began to feel like prison walls rather than protection. The breaking point came during a client meeting where a father was setting up trust funds for his college-age children. The genuine care and thought he put into securing their futures triggered an unexpected wave of emotion I barely managed to contain until the meeting ended. That evening alone in my apartment, I finally acknowledged the pain I'd been carrying. My professional success, while real and earned, hadn't healed the wounds of growing up feeling unwanted. The next day, I researched therapists specializing in family trauma. I made an appointment with Dr. Kira Patel. Our first session was uncomfortable. I sat stiffly on her office couch, providing clinical details about my childhood, as though describing someone else's life. My parents experienced financial hardship and were unable to provide emotional support. I said using the distanced language of financial reports. Dr. Patel saw through this immediately. "You talk about these painful experiences like you're giving a quarterly review," she observed. "What happens when you let yourself feel angry about how you were treated?" That question opened floodgates I'd kept firmly shut. Over the following months, therapy became the space where I could finally acknowledge the hurt, anger, and lingering desire for parental approval that I'd suppressed for years. Dr. Patel helped me recognize patterns in my adult relationships stemming directly from my childhood experiences. "You've built a life focused on never needing anyone," she noted during one session. "That's helped you survive, but it's also keeping you isolated." Working through these issues was painful, but transformative. As I processed my childhood trauma, I began making small changes. I accepted an invitation to dinner at my colleague Alicia's home, meeting her husband and children. I joined a weekend volunteer program teaching financial literacy to high school students from underprivileged backgrounds. Working with these teenagers reconnected me with my younger self. Many came from challenging home situations, but showed remarkable resilience. Teaching them about budgeting, saving, and investing became deeply fulfilling, offering a way to transform my own painful experiences into something valuable for others. "Miss Morgan, did your parents teach you about money?" one student asked during a session. I considered the question carefully. "They taught me its absence can destroy families," I answered honestly. "But most of what I know about building financial security, I had to learn myself. That's why I'm sharing it with you now." Meanwhile, my career continued its upward trajectory. I developed a specialization in ESG investing, focusing on environmental, social, and governance factors. This niche expertise positioned me for a significant promotion to senior analyst with a substantial salary increase. The promotion came with a corner office, a small team to manage, and recognition within the firm as someone with leadership potential. The day I received the promotion, Laura Zimmerman took me to lunch at an upscale restaurant overlooking Millennium Park. "I want you to know how impressed we've been with your growth," she said. "Not just professionally, but personally. You've become more accessible to clients and colleagues while maintaining your exceptional analytical skills." I thanked her, acknowledging how much her mentorship had contributed to my success. For the first time, I felt comfortable enough to share a small piece of my background. "I didn't have role models for professional success growing up," I admitted. "Learning to navigate this world hasn't always been straightforward." She nodded thoughtfully. "Most of us have obstacles we've had to overcome. The ones who succeed are those who learn to build bridges rather than walls." With my increased financial security, I purchased my first home, a 2-bedroom condo in a dormant building with large windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of achievement tinged with sadness that I had no one to share it with. That evening, I called my parents for the first time in months. My mother answered with her characteristic wariness. "Denise, this is unexpected." "I just wanted to let you know I bought a condo," I said, hoping for some acknowledgement. After a pause, she responded, "Well, I hope you didn't overextend yourself. Housing markets crash, you know." "I'm aware of market fluctuations, Mom. I do this for a living." "No need to get snippy," she replied. "Your father and I are just trying to protect you from disappointment." I ended the call shortly after realizing they were incapable of celebrating my success without warning of imminent failure. That night, I added a note to my therapy journal. Their limitations are not mine to fix. My achievements are valid whether they recognize them or not. The following week, during a volunteer session, I stayed late helping a particularly dedicated student named Zoe with her college financial aid applications. As we worked, she shared her dreams of becoming an architect, despite her mother's insistence that she get a practical job immediately after high school. She thinks college is a waste of money, Zoe explained. But I know it's the only way I'll have the career I want. I saw myself in her determination and carefully helped her navigate the scholarship options that had been my own lifeline years earlier. As we finished, she looked at me with sincere gratitude. "Thanks for believing I can do this, Miss Morgan." Her words stayed with me long after illuminating a truth. I was just beginning to understand the validation I had sought from my parents all these years could come from connections I built as an adult. From mentoring, from friendship, from creating my own chosen family who saw and appreciated my true self. When Alicia invited me to her daughter's ballet recital, I surprised both of us by accepting. Our friendship had developed gradually through shared projects and lunch conversations, but I had maintained my usual boundaries around after-work socializing. Something about her straightforward manner and genuine interest in others had slowly earned my trust. "Fair warning," she joked as I slid into the auditorium seat beside her. "6-year-olds aren't exactly Baryshnikov. There will be falling." The performance was endearingly chaotic, with tiny dancers in tutus occasionally forgetting steps or waving to parents. Watching Alicia cheer for her daughter regardless of mistakes felt like witnessing a different language of parenting than I had known. Over dinner afterward, while her daughter proudly wore her costume and tiara, Alicia asked about my weekend plans. "Just work and some investment research," I replied automatically. She fixed me with a knowing look. "All work and no play makes Denise a very successful but possibly cranky analyst." I laughed. "Financial security is worth a little crankiness." "Speaking of family," she said, changing topics with characteristic directness, "you never mention yours. Do they live far from Chicago?" "Detroit?" I answered, suddenly interested in rearranging my napkin. "We're not close." Alicia nodded without pushing further. "Family is complicated. Some of us get lucky with the ones we're born to. Others have to build their own." Her simple acknowledgement, free of judgment or prying questions, created space for honesty I rarely allowed myself. Mine wasn't the supportive kind. "That's their loss," she said matter-of-factly. "But it doesn't have to define your future relationships." A few weeks later, scrolling through social media during a rare quiet evening, I noticed a mutual friend's post mentioning my hometown. Curious, I clicked through to a local Detroit community page where residents shared neighborhood updates. A post about property tax increases caught my attention, with several commenters lamenting the impact on longtime homeowners. One comment from a Marge Morgan sounded eerily familiar. "After 30 years in this house, we might have to sell. My husband's pension barely covers utilities, and these tax hikes are the final straw." My stomach tightened. My parents had never reached out about financial difficulties, but their stubborn pride made asking for help nearly impossible. Despite our strained relationship, the thought of them losing their home struck a surprisingly painful chord. The next day, I contacted an old high school acquaintance who had remained in our neighborhood, carefully framing my question as casual interest in the old community. What I learned confirmed my suspicions. My parents were indeed struggling with back taxes and an underwater mortgage following some desperate refinancing during the last recession. That evening, I brought the situation to my therapy session with Dr. Patel. "I could easily help them," I explained, pacing her office. "The amount they need to stabilize their situation is within my means now." "The question isn't whether you can afford it financially," Dr. Patel observed. "It's whether you can afford it emotionally." Her words stopped me mid-stride. "What do you mean?" "Giving significant financial help to parents who have consistently devalued your achievements and undermined your confidence is complex. What are your expectations about how this gift would affect your relationship?" I hadn't allowed myself to examine that question. Part of me, the wounded child still seeking approval, hoped that helping them would finally prove my worth. Another part feared they would take my assistance as granted while continuing to predict my failure. I don't know, I admitted, but I do know I don't want them to lose their home. Perhaps the question to consider is whether you can give this gift freely without expectations of emotional return, Dr. Patel suggested. Can you help them because you choose to not, because you're seeking the recognition they've been unable to provide? That question stayed with me for days as I researched my parents' financial situation more thoroughly. Through public records, I discovered their mortgage was held by Midwest Regional Bank, which coincidentally had investment ties to Westbrook. Their home was worth significantly less than they owed, a common situation in parts of Detroit still recovering from economic downturns. With my professional connections, I could negotiate a settlement that would clear their debt entirely, giving them full ownership of their home without the burden of a mortgage. Such a gift would transform their retirement years, providing security they hadn't experienced in decades. As I considered this option, I learned through the community page that my parents' 35th wedding anniversary was approaching in just 2 months. The timing seemed significant, a milestone celebration paired with a gift that could change their financial reality completely. During our next session, I shared my plan with Dr. Patel. I want to give them the house deed as an anniversary gift, not to buy their approval, but as a genuine attempt at reconciliation. What will you do if they reject this gesture? She asked. It was a possibility I needed to consider. Then at least I'll know I tried to break our cycle of hurt rather than perpetuating it. The decision made, I began the complex process of negotiating with the bank. My professional credentials opened doors, and my understanding of mortgage settlements helped me secure an extremely favorable arrangement. I would pay a lump sum significantly below the outstanding balance, and in return, the bank would release the lien on the property and transfer full ownership to my parents. The negotiations took weeks with multiple calls and meetings conducted during my lunch breaks or early mornings. Finally, just 10 days before their anniversary, I received the official deed and property transfer documents beautifully prepared by the bank's legal department at my request. I purchased an elegant wooden box with a silver clasp, placing the documents inside, along with a simple card expressing my congratulations on their anniversary. The gift represented not just financial value, but my genuine hope for healing our fractured family. The night before my flight to Detroit, Alicia called to check on my preparations. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my stomach fluttering with anticipation and anxiety. "Remember, you're giving this gift from strength, not desperation," she reminded me. "Whatever happens, you've built a good life. This gesture is about grace, not need." Her words steadied me as I boarded the plane the next morning carrying the wooden box that contained both a property deed and my tentative hope for reconciliation. Whatever my parents' reaction, I was approaching them not as the needy child they had dismissed, but as an adult extending an olive branch from a position of hard-won stability. The Detroit suburbs hadn't changed much since I'd left for college. The same potholes dotted Maple Avenue, the same faded awning hung over Gino's Pizza, and the same American flag fluttered from the Pattersons' front porch across from my parents' house. Standing on the sidewalk looking at the home where I'd grown up, I felt a strange disconnection, like visiting a museum exhibit of my past life. The house showed signs of neglect that hadn't been visible in my childhood. Peeling paint around the windows, missing shingles on the roof, concrete cracks in the driveway. My father's pride had always kept the property meticulously maintained. Its current condition spoke volumes about their financial situation. I smoothed my blazer, checked that the wooden gift box was secure in my tote bag, and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my mother, her hair grayer and her frame thinner than I remembered. "You're early," she said by way of greeting. "Dinner won't be ready for another hour." No hug, no mention of the 8 months since we'd last spoken. Some things never changed. "It's good to see you too, Mom," I replied, stepping past her into the familiar entryway. "How have you been?" "Same as always," she answered with a shrug. "Your father's in the living room." My father sat in his recliner, the same one he'd occupied throughout my childhood. He looked up briefly from his newspaper. "So the Chicago executive graces us with her presence." "Hi, Dad. Happy anniversary." He grunted in acknowledgement before returning to his reading. The knot in my stomach tightened, but I reminded myself that their behaviors were about them, not me. I had come with intentions of healing, not to seek the validation they'd never been able to provide. The hour before dinner passed awkwardly. My mother bustled around the kitchen, refusing my offers of help with curt assurances that she knew her own kitchen, thank you very much. My father remained largely silent, occasionally making remarks about those financial types who were ruining the country. I recognized the pattern, their discomfort with my success manifesting as dismissiveness and passive aggression. In the past, I would have either withdrawn completely or desperately tried to earn their approval. Today, I chose a different path, responding with calm neutrality while maintaining my boundaries. Dinner was a simple affair of pot roast and potatoes, the same meal my mother had prepared for special occasions throughout my childhood. As we sat at the kitchen table, I noticed the wedding photo on the sideboard, my parents looking impossibly young and hopeful. 35 years is quite an achievement. I offered, genuinely impressed by their endurance, despite their obvious unhappiness. Marriage takes commitment, my mother replied, cutting her meat with precise movements. Not everyone understands that these days. The implied criticism, that my single status reflected some character deficiency rather than careful choice, hung in the air. I let it pass without response. How's that fancy job of yours? My father asked, his tone suggesting he expected to hear about imminent failure. It's going well, I answered him simply. I received a promotion to senior analyst recently. Senior analyst, my mother repeated as though testing an unfamiliar food. I suppose that comes with a big salary for someone with no family to support. The compensation is fair for my level of responsibility, I replied evenly. Must be nice, my father muttered. Some of us work just as hard for a lot less. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of Dr. Patel's advice to maintain perspective. Different industries have different compensation structures, I said neutrally. The automotive sector's decline wasn't your fault, Dad. He looked momentarily surprised by the absence of defensiveness in my response, before his expression hardened again. Easy to be philosophical when you're not the one who lost everything. As dinner progressed, I tried steering the conversation toward more positive topics. Memories of family trips to Mackinac Island, the community garden my mother had once tended, the classic car shows my father used to enjoy. Each attempt was met with minimal engagement or redirected toward complaints about current hardships. When my mother began clearing the plates, I knew it was time. I retrieved the wooden box from my tote bag and placed it on the table as she returned. I brought you something for your anniversary, I said, pushing the box toward them. I hope you'll like it. My mother looked at the box without touching it, suspicion evident in her expression. You didn't need to spend money on us. I wanted to, I replied. It's important to me. My father eyed the box as though it might contain something dangerous. We don't need charity, Denise. We manage just fine. I pushed the box closer to them. It's not charity. It's an anniversary gift. My mother finally picked up the box, holding it with visible reluctance. Instead of opening it, she set it aside on the counter behind her. We'll look at it later. I need to serve dessert. The dismissal stung, but I had prepared myself for resistance. I'd really like you to open it now. Always demanding attention, my father said with a harsh laugh. Some things never change. We don't need your fancy gifts, my mother added, her voice sharp. Just because you have disposable income to throw around doesn't mean we want handouts from our freeloader daughter. The word freeloader hit like a slap. Throughout my life, I had been anything but. Working multiple jobs, earning scholarships, building my career through relentless effort. Your mother's right, my father continued, warming to the theme. We've managed 35 years without expensive presents. We don't need whatever's in that box. Something shifted inside me at that moment. Not anger, but clarity. They had no idea what they were rejecting. Not just the financial gift, but the olive branch it represented. Their pride and bitterness had become so ingrained, they couldn't recognize a genuine attempt at reconciliation. With steady hands, I stood and retrieved the box from the counter. You know what? I think you should see what you're so casually dismissing. I opened the box myself, removing the legal documents with their official seals and signatures. This is the deed to your house. I paid off your mortgage in full. The bank released the lien. You own this home free and clear now. Their expressions transformed in an instant, shock replacing disdain, disbelief replacing dismissal. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and my father half rose from his chair before sinking back down. "That's impossible," he whispered. "We still owe over $100,000. "Not anymore," I replied, laying out the bank's official letter confirming the settlement. "This is what I wanted to give you. Security for your retirement freedom from monthly payments, the peace of knowing you won't lose your home." My mother stared at the documents, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for them. "How did you? Why would you?" "Because, despite everything, you're my parents," I answered simply. "And I have the means to help." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of papers being shuffled as my father examined the legal documents with disbelief. Then, like a switch being flipped, their attitudes transformed. My mother's face softened into a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in decades. "Oh, Denise," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly warm. "This is the most wonderful gift anyone could give us. We've been so worried about losing the house." My father stood moving toward me with arms outstretched. "I always knew you were going to do great things," he declared, as though he hadn't spent years predicting my failure. "That's why we pushed you so hard. We knew you had potential." The sudden reversal was jarring, more painful somehow than their previous coldness. They hadn't changed. They had simply recalculated my value based on what I could provide. As my father attempted to embrace me, I stepped back, maintaining the physical distance that mirrored my emotional realization. "I need to clarify something," I said, my voice steady. "I didn't bring this gift to buy your approval or affection. I brought it because I thought it might help us start healing our relationship." Confusion crossed their faces. My mother reached for the deed. "Of course it will help. This changes everything." "Does it?" I asked quietly. "5 minutes ago, I was a freeloader you didn't want gifts from. Now that you know the gift is valuable, I'm suddenly worthy of your affection." My father's expression hardened. "You're twisting our words. We've always been proud of you." "No," I countered, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. "You've never been proud of me. You've been resentful, dismissive, and convinced I would fail. The only thing that's changed is your realization that I can provide something you need." I gathered the documents back into the box, my decision crystallizing as I moved. This wasn't how healing began. This was how unhealthy patterns continued. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, alarm replacing her brief warmth. "I'm reconsidering whether this is the right way to help you," I answered. "True reconciliation can't be bought. It has to be built on mutual respect." "You can't take it back," my father protested, his voice rising. "You already paid the bank." "Yes, I did," I acknowledged. "But the deed hasn't been transferred to your names yet. That's what these signing papers were for." As I closed the box, my parents' expression shifted from confusion to panic. My mother stepped toward me, hand outstretched. "Denise, don't be hasty. We're grateful, truly. Your father didn't mean what he said earlier." "I think he did," I replied. "And that's the problem. You both meant exactly what you said until you saw what was in the box." I slipped the box back into my tote bag, feeling strangely calm despite the tension crackling in the room. "I need some time to think about this. Real help shouldn't create unhealthy dynamics between us." My father's face flushed with anger. "After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you treat us." Dangling financial help and then yanking it away. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. I'm not yanking anything away. I'm pausing to make sure whatever help I provide supports healing rather than enabling patterns that hurt all of us. My mother began to cry tears that looked more calculated than genuine. "We're going to lose our home and our own daughter doesn't care." "I care enough to want our relationship to be based on more than financial transactions," I replied, moving toward the door. "I'll be in touch once I've had time to consider the best path forward." As I left their house, their protests following me down the driveway, I felt neither vindication nor regret, only the certainty that true healing would require more than money. It would demand honesty boundaries and a willingness to break patterns that had damaged us all for decades. The door of my hotel room closed behind me with a soft click, and the composed facade I'd maintained through dinner and the drive away from my parents' house crumbled. Sinking onto the edge of the bed, I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking with silent sobs that had been building for years. This wasn't how reconciliation was supposed to look. In the hopeful scenario, I'd imagined my parents would have been surprised, but grateful the gift opening a door to honest conversation about our painful past. Instead, their instant transformation from contempt to calculated warmth, the moment they understood the gift's value, had illuminated an uncomfortable truth. The conditional nature of their regard had never changed. My phone began buzzing insistently, first with text messages, then calls. My parents vacillating between apologies and accusations, demands and pleas. I silenced the device and placed it face down on the nightstand, needing space from their emotional whiplash. Instead, I called Alicia, the one person who might understand the complicated tangle of emotions I was experiencing. It was awful, I told her after explaining what had happened. The way they flipped from calling me a freeloader to suddenly claiming they'd always believed in me. It was like watching actors change character mid-scene. People show you who they are in moments of surprise, Alicia responded. Their first reaction was the honest one. The second was calculation. The worst part is I still want to help them, I admitted. Despite everything, I don't want them to lose their home. That compassion speaks to your character, not theirs, she said. But help with strings attached isn't really help. It's control. And help without boundaries isn't help either. It's enablement. Her words echoed Dr. Patel's guidance about finding the balance between generosity and self-protection. I needed professional perspective on how to proceed. The next morning, I called Dr. Patel's office and was fortunate to secure a virtual emergency session. Sitting in my hotel room, I described the previous night's disaster in detail. I feel stuck, I concluded. Part of me wants to walk away completely. Another part feels responsible for their well-being despite everything. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. Those competing impulses make perfect sense. The child in you still seeks their approval and feels responsible for their happiness. The adult in you recognizes their manipulative patterns and knows boundaries are essential. So what do? I asked. Sign over the house deed and accept that our relationship will never be healthy, or keep the deed and let them face foreclosure. Those aren't your only options, she pointed out. There's middle ground that honors both your generosity and your need for respect. She suggested a third approach offering financial help, with clear conditions attached. Not punitive ones, but boundaries that would support healthier interaction. What conditions would feel appropriate to you? She asked. I considered this carefully. If they want my help, we need to address the patterns that have damaged our relationship. Maybe family therapy. That sounds like a reasonable condition for significant financial assistance. Dr. Patel agreed. It acknowledges your willingness to help while requiring mutual effort toward healing. By the end of our session, I had a clearer path forward. I would offer to resolve their mortgage situation, but only if they agreed to participate in family counseling. The house would become theirs free and clear, only after they demonstrated genuine commitment to that process. My parents' calls and messages had continued throughout the day, growing increasingly desperate. When I finally returned their call that evening, my mother answered immediately. Denise, thank goodness, we've been so worried. I needed time to think, I explained calmly. I'm prepared to discuss the house situation if you're willing to listen without interrupting. My father, apparently on an extension, agreed quickly. Of course, we're listening. I'm still willing to resolve your mortgage, I began. But I've realized that simply handing over the deed wouldn't be healthy for any of us. Financial assistance, without addressing our underlying relationship issues, would just perpetuate old patterns. What does that mean exactly? My mother asked, wariness evident in her voice. It means I'm offering a conditional arrangement. I'll complete the transfer of the deed if you both agree to participate in family therapy with me for at least 6 months. The silence that followed was telling. Therapy. My father finally repeated, as though I'd suggested something outlandish. We don't need some stranger telling us how to be a family. That's my condition, I stated firmly. I believe we all need help understanding the patterns that have damaged our relationship. If you're not interested in that process, I'll need to find another way to assist you that doesn't involve direct financial support from me. This is emotional blackmail, my mother declared, her voice rising. No, I corrected her. Blackmail involves threats. I'm offering a gift with conditions that benefit everyone involved. You're free to decline. After more resistance and attempts to negotiate, they reluctantly agreed to consider family therapy, though their commitment seemed tenuous at best. I'll arrange a consultation with a family therapist in Detroit, I told them. If you attend the first 3 sessions with genuine participation, I'll begin the process of transferring the deed. After 6 months of consistent engagement in therapy, the house will be fully yours. And if we decide therapy isn't for us, my father challenged, then I'll help you explore other options for your housing situation, I replied. But the outright gift of the house will no longer be one of them. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it represented a crucial step in changing our family dynamic. For perhaps the first time, I was establishing boundaries while still extending care, neither cutting them off entirely nor allowing their treatment of me to go unaddressed. Finding a qualified family therapist in Detroit took several days. Dr. Walters, a specialist in adult family reconciliation, agreed to take our case after I explained the situation. We scheduled the first session for the following week, and I extended my hotel stay to attend in person. The initial consultation was predictably uncomfortable. My parents arrived defensive and skeptical, my father checking his watch repeatedly as Dr. Walters explained the process. I understand this feels foreign to all of you, the therapist acknowledged. Family patterns develop over decades. Examining them requires courage from everyone involved. My mother glanced at the clock. How many of these sessions are required before the house situation is resolved? Dr. Walters met her gaze directly. Mrs. Morgan, if your primary motivation is securing property rather than healing relationships, this process won't be effective. Meaningful change requires genuine engagement. My father shifted uncomfortably. We wouldn't be here if Denise hadn't insisted on it. That's honest, at least, Dr. Walters noted. And it's a starting point. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with reluctant steps. Over the next 2 hours, Dr. Walters gently but persistently guided us through an initial assessment of our family dynamics. Though my parents' participation was minimal, they did remain for the entire session and agreed to return the following week. After 3 sessions, true to my word, I began the legal process of transferring the deed, though, with a carefully structured agreement drafted by my attorney. The house would be placed in a simple trust, with full ownership transferring to my parents after 6 months of continued therapy participation. Progress was neither linear nor dramatic. Some sessions ended with doors slammed or tears shed. Others yielded small breakthroughs, like my mother's reluctant admission during our 4th session that her own parents had been emotionally neglectful. My father never thought anything I did was good enough, she revealed, staring at her hands. I swore I'd be different with my own children. Yet Denise experienced similar criticism from you, Dr. Walters observed gently. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I didn't see it that way. I thought I was preparing her for a hard world. My father's breakthrough came during our 7th session when he finally acknowledged the shame he'd carried since losing his job. I was supposed to provide for my family, he said, his voice rough with emotion. When I couldn't, I felt like a failure. Seeing Denise succeed where I had failed, it was easier to predict she'd fall than to admit she was doing better than I ever had. These moments of vulnerability didn't immediately transform our relationship, but they created space for understanding that had never existed before. By our 10th session, we could discuss painful memories without immediately becoming defensive or accusatory. 3 months into therapy, I returned to Chicago, continuing our sessions via video conference. The distance provided helpful perspective, allowing me to maintain my separate life while still participating in the healing process. Dr. Walters recommended we each pursue individual therapy alongside our family sessions. a suggestion I had already implemented with Dr. Patel, and which my parents reluctantly accepted. At the 6-month mark, true to my agreement, I completed the transfer of the house deed. The occasion wasn't marked by dramatic reconciliation or tearful embraces. Instead, we met at a notary's office, signed the necessary documents, and went to lunch afterward. A civil, somewhat awkward meal where we discussed safe topics like neighborhood changes and the upcoming Detroit winter. As we prepared to part, my father cleared his throat awkwardly. "The therapy sessions, we'll continue them if you want." It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it was an acknowledgement that our work wasn't finished simply because the property transfer was complete. For my parents who had spent decades avoiding difficult emotional terrain, it represented significant progress. "I'd like that," I replied honestly. Our relationship continued to evolve slowly over the following months. We established a pattern of regular phone calls, brief conversations that gradually became less strained. I visited Detroit quarterly, staying in a hotel, rather than their house, maintaining the boundary that helped me engage with them without reverting to old patterns. The most profound changes, however, weren't in my parents' behavior toward me, but in my response to them. Where criticism had once devastated me, I now recognized it as a reflection of their limitations rather than my worth. I could maintain compassion for their struggles without accepting responsibility for their happiness. This newfound emotional equilibrium extended to other areas of my life. At work, I became more comfortable advocating for my ideas and setting appropriate boundaries. My friendship with Alicia deepened, along with other relationships I had previously kept at arm's length. 6 months after the deed transfer, I met Michael Reynolds at a financial literacy fundraiser. Unlike previous relationships where I'd either withdrawn at the first sign of conflict or molded myself to others' expectations, I approached this connection with new clarity about my own worth and boundaries. When Michael asked about my family during our third date, I was able to share the complicated truth without shame or defensiveness. "We're working on our relationship," I explained. "It's not perfect, but it's more honest than it used to be." His response, thoughtful interest without judgment, confirmed I was making healthier relationship choices. We began dating seriously, each bringing our own complex family histories and commitment to breaking unhealthy patterns. During a therapy session a year after the anniversary dinner disaster, Dr. Patel asked what I had learned from the experience. "I've learned that true generosity isn't about giving without limits," I reflected. "Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is establish boundaries that allow for genuine connection rather than exploitation." "And what about forgiveness?" she asked. I considered this carefully. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending harm didn't occur. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment while still protecting yourself from further harm. I'm working on forgiving my parents without abandoning my own needs in the process. The journey toward family healing continues with progress measured in small moments rather than dramatic transformations. My parents may never become the supportive figures I longed for as a child, but we've established a more honest relationship based on reality rather than expectations or obligations. More importantly, I've learned to provide for myself the validation and security I once sought from them. The wounded child who desperately wanted parental approval has grown into a woman who understands her worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. The gift I ultimately gave my parents wasn't just financial security, but the opportunity to develop a more authentic relationship with their daughter. Whether they fully embrace that opportunity remains their choice. My commitment is to maintaining the balance between compassion and self-respect that allows for genuine connection without sacrificing my hard-won peace. Looking back at that anniversary dinner, I recognize it as a pivotal moment, not because it instantly fixed our family, but because it forced us to acknowledge truths we had spent decades avoiding. Sometimes the most valuable gifts aren't the ones wrapped in beautiful boxes, but the difficult conversations that finally allow healing to begin. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family while still showing love? What helped you find that balance? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for genuine relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that healing family wounds takes courage, time, and often professional support. You're not alone in that struggle.